Welcome back, everyone, to our HealthTech at Medicon Valley event. We're about to go into our third and final challenge of the day called integrating health-related data. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, just as some gentle reminders, if you're on Zoom and you wish to have an enhanced experience with the live stream, you're very welcome to join Vimeo. The link is in the Zoom chat, where you'll also be a live stream via Vimeo. You're also encouraged to log on to Slido, where we will be able to post questions to speakers, as well as engage in the interactive elements of our program. And for those who are with us from the beginning, our keynote presentation will now be featured at 12:30. So if you're able to stay on for that, I would strongly encourage you to do so, because we have a really exciting speaker lined up. So without further ado, I'd like us to go straight into our session for today. And to get us familiarized with this topic, integrating health-related data, I would like to launch our first audience poll for this session. So please go to slido.com. You see it on the screen. The event code is HTMV. And I would love you to answer the following. Which of the following are you measuring by yourself today? Physical activity, blood pressure, stress, sleep, diet, heart rate, blood sugar level, and so on. Just to get a sense of how are we engaging in the collection of health-related data today. So we have a response for blood pressure, more coming up, physical activity, sleep, heart rate. I know that not all of our options are shown, but there's 0% pain. 17% are not measuring any at this point. So physical activity seems to be the most mature dimension that we're measuring today, followed by blood pressure, sleep, and heart rate. But I would say that a third of our attendees are not measuring any of these data points today. Really interesting. I would then like to go into the second question when we talk about collecting consumer-generated health data. The second question is, how much weight should healthcare place on such self-generated data when it comes to decisions which affect your health? Should healthcare place very much weight, some weight, little weight, or not at all? So if you're collecting your sleep information, diet information, physical activity, stress levels, pain levels, how much weight should healthcare place on your own self-generated data when it comes to decisions which affect your health? And it looks like most of us are responding some kind of weight. Interestingly, no one has said none at all. So there seems to be some desire to use our data in a much better way within healthcare. Still 73% on some weight, 20% with little weight, and 7% with much weight. Really interesting. And I think to discuss these results even further, I would like to welcome Per Brink from Roche. He is the CSR partner, and he'll help us to frame today's session. So very warm welcome.
Thank you.
Per. So I think you're familiar with these questions, which came from a PwC study in 2019. Do you feel that the responses are surprising to you?
No, not really. I think that in terms of collecting self-generating data is really something that we're becoming more and more familiar with. At the same time, I think we can put some more perspectives into this. We're also becoming more and more aware of maybe the risks of data being misused.
Right.
So I think that might be something that we'll be discussing more today. And also, I think the question was about where we actively collect data ourselves. I think an equally important question is, what do we do with data that is generated without our active, if you say, knowledge or participation in it?
Yep.
So all the data that is generated with the things we're doing in our daily living, how is that going to be used? So I think that is equally important. Then we had a question about the weight of using this data in healthcare. Yep. I think, and then we need to bear in mind what effect will, or how does that data have an impact on the decisions that are being made. Yep. If there's no clear, if we say, evidence between that type of data and the type of, for example, medical decision that is going to be made, of course, we should put less weight into it. Traditionally, data has been coming from a pharma company and looking at how research has been done within pharmaceuticals, this type of data has not really been used that much in terms of generating evidence for how well a pharmaceutical is going to work in the end. And hence, that is not the type of data that's used for the healthcare system to make decisions. When we're now becoming more and more familiar with and confident in using and generating data ourselves, over time, I'm sure that we will, to a high degree, also see evidence where you could, if you say, connect that type of data with the efficacy and safety of treatments. And then we will, to a high degree, use that also for decision-making in healthcare.
Absolutely. And you're talking about the increased interest in using real-world evidence and patient-reported outcomes to inform of the efficacy of a clinical trial or a treatment. What are your thoughts as well on all the other data that's being generated in healthcare, in social care, and how do you think they're being used today?
Yeah, no, I think that we have come quite far in terms of collecting data or generating data. I think where we're lag behind is how we use the data, and also how we, if you say, integrate the different sources of data in such a way that we can lift the knowledge to an even higher level. So there, I think, is where we have lots to do moving forward.
Right.
And again, I think that is an area where I hope that we can come a little bit further into discussions today.
Absolutely. And this was a theme that we jointly, identified. How is Roche working with health data today? And, why is it so important for Roche that we kind of go further in integrating these different sources of data?
Yeah. I think that this is a key area for us moving forward, and we have not only pharmaceuticals but also diagnostics and genomic profiling and so on in our portfolio. As we see as a whole, you need to have come in from many different perspectives to really move, if you say, the solutions within medical treatments forward. For us, we do see that the next step in the medical advances is really to become even more patient-centric and move towards personalized healthcare, where you really look at what are the specific needs of that individual that stands in front of you. And to go there, we need to have much better understanding of the data of that specific person, and what are the evidence for example, for a new treatment to work for that person and not for another one. So the future is really about the data.
Absolutely. Such an important field. And we have two really exciting pitches today that will address this in different angles. What are you looking forward to hearing from those two pitches today? Yeah,
first off, I really look forward to, I hope, two very inspiring presentations, I would say, but also I would like to see some innovative solutions within this field, where that could either be a final solution, something that could already be available, or I would also encourage just to have an interesting vision. Where are we heading? And how can we maybe move there together towards this vision? Because I believe that very much of the solutions for the future is about how do we collaborate and partner.
Absolutely.
And also something that we have learned over time is that it's not only about having a great solution, it's also about how do we get it implemented. So I think that is an area that we need to look into also, and it will be interesting to hear a little bit from the pitches today. How is this going to be implemented into the ecosystems that we have today? Absolutely.
Really great. Thank you so much, Per. So without further ado, I would actually like to invite our very first pitching company. We have Eva Keltley, CEO at Capiche, who will be presenting to us today on patient-centric integration for decisions in real time. So very welcome, Eva. The floor is yours.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I look forward to take you through our presentation of what we do at Capiche. Like Pal mentioned, every day lots of data is generated. I found numbers of 1.7 megabytes of data is generated every second by every person every day. Now, not all of this data is relevant for healthcare, but a lot of it is. At Capiche, we have been working with models and solutions to address these issues, to be able to integrate data, to take it, make it understandable. Capiche works with new technologies to develop solutions to make data available for data exploration, for data integration, and for data visualization. We are a small company based here in Malmö with our roots in pharma and in software development. So traditional technology is commonly built in relational databases, table structures, which is hard to build models for describing a single patient. At Capiche, we work with a graph database technology instead. We have a patented way of accessing data in this solution, and also we have different interfaces that we can work with. Here we see some graphic description of what data can look like for an individual patient. Each patient does not contain the same data. So we need to be able to make sure that we have models that can incorporate new data and expand the model as necessary. Working with the patient, we want to be able to create a holistic perspective so that we can work with, like Pal said, personalized medicine. We want to be able to understand how a person has experienced symptoms, been diagnosed, and take medications, and what type of effects that patient is experiencing. But it's not just one patient. We want to be able to see that patient in a context, probably. We want to be able to compare it to a subgroup or to understand it to a population of sorts. And in order to do that, we need integrated data. Data integration can be seen as simple. So people talk about data lakes, but just throwing all data in one bundle doesn't do any good. We need to make sure that it's comparable. We need to make sure that we use the same units for data, that we call data the same thing, and that we understand it properly. We work with an objective standard that we model data towards so that it can be reused in other contexts other than where it was created. And we base our data integration on the FAIR principles. That is, data should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So in our solution, data is available in a web-based solution, which means that data and interfaces are always available. But what makes us different is that you don't only have access to the data itself, you also have access to the metadata. You can incorporate how data is created and how it can be interpreted, in what context it's valid. We can provide solutions that are pre-configured, but also let users build their own models and build their own tables and charts, which gives huge flexibility. With all this aggregated data, we also have opportunities to build models for prediction and also to find patients that are similar to the one patient that we're studying at the moment, which gives huge power of the data. Capiche is a solution provider. That is, we don't have any data ourselves. So we look for partnerships. We would like to explore ways to work with our data and our solutions in a healthcare environment. Commonly, we provide our solution as a software as a service, but we are also open to incorporate it into client environments. Well, I think I'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much.
Very good, Eva. Thank you so much for your presentation. Per, I would like to invite you to the front as well. Per, do you have some questions for Eva?
Yeah, I think thank you very much for an interesting presentation and for a very inspirational solution. And what I'm looking at immediately here, there are two things that popped in my mind. Was first off was the access to data, and that is an area that I believe that although yes, we are collecting data in numerous places, but then we come to the issue about how do we get access to it and who's getting access to what and so on. Mm-hmm. How are you working with that? And what type of data are we talking about here? Where is it coming from?
Well, we're open to take any type of data. We can work with data from healthcare systems or data from different apps and different solutions. It is, like I said, we're a technology provider, so we'll take what we get. The access to the data, of course, you need to restrict that probably in certain circumstances. And we have user rights so that we can address that in our system.
And is that when you use this data, is it integrated with other systems? So it's, if you say, continuously updated, or is it like that you move data from one place to another at one point in time, or how does it work?
Sorry. It needs to be integrated in our solution in order for it to be searchable and findable and accessible, and unfortunately. But I think that way we can also make sure that it's comparable and that it's curated so that it fits into the whole picture of the patient.
I have two more questions.
Absolutely, there's time for that.
And one of them was about I just found it interesting when I saw this one of your slides with kind of a mind map kind of description. Could you just explain what did we see there?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Well, what we saw there was the data structure. So we have maybe information about the patient in the center. We have laboratory values. We have diagnosis, medications, and all this data is related together. So when we do a search, for example, for a certain medication, we can pull up all patients that have experienced that medication, or we can also do searches where we find all medications that these patients have experienced. So we get a full picture of the patient.
And also, do you have any examples of how this has been used so far?
Well, we're on our way out to getting to the market currently. We've worked with prototypes, both some healthcare data and some data from clinical trials. So we're still looking for different opportunities to develop our solutions.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much for a great discussion. We will continue it at the concluding discussion as well. So thank you, Eva. I would like to invite our second pitch for the day from the Danish side. We have Troels Berman Mortensen, CEO and founder of DataFair, with a very provocative presentation title. He will try to answer, well, his point of view is no and yes is the only answer to the question, do we need easier access to health data? Take it away, Troels.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, my name is Troels Mortensen from DataFair, and I realized after I sent in the presentation that titles like no and yes these days is something one should be very careful about using in any context. So, but this is also a good intro into clinical data, because your clinical data needs to be seen in the right context to make sense. So, no and yes is the obvious answer to the question, do we need easier access to health data? No and yes. And let me get into that in a second. I will, as you see in this outline here, and I'll give you this structure because I realize I'm the only thing standing between you and your lunch. So even though you may not be munching away behind the screens, you may still have low blood sugar. So 4 easy questions: no, yes, why, how, and then a brief conclusion. And who is this guy standing here? Well, I'm a part of a team the Data Fair founder team. We founded this company only 2 years ago. And what I did was I said, I've been working in startup companies for the last 20 years. So I figured I was young once. Let's try and get some old experienced hands together. So all of us, I think, together have an average age of about 50. And that's really great running a startup company like that. The chairman is Claus Juhl. He was the city manager of Copenhagen municipality for years and is a very well-connected former civil servant. It helps when you realize that working with data means working with public data, means you have to do everything in the spirit of a public-private partnership. Our CSO Tove has worked for 20 years servicing pharmaceutical companies, and she's a specialist in health economic analysis and a professor at the University of Ghent as well. Klaus Rehfeldt, he's our chief data officer. It's not collateralized debt obligations, the CDO, but chief data officer. He knows everything about healthcare data in Denmark. And Jakob Bardam is a professor at the Technical University of Copenhagen, and he knows just how complicated and complex it can be if you want to combine data from different data sources. Very much, he knows the complications of the things that Capiche is also trying to offer a solution to. So we have 100 years of experience with these 5 experienced people. And how are we then going to use that experience? Well, we'll get to that. First question, do we need easier access to health data? And the answer is a resounding no. No, not per se. The question is not how do we get easy access to data? Because when you work with health data, you work in the health space, and the principle in health is do no harm. If you want to use data, it's because you want to use data to improve the treatment. So the principle is do no harm. And therefore, we're dealing with data that is private, that is confidential, that can be misused, that can be abused. And since trust is necessary for people to be willing to share the data, you have to respect, you have to build any attempt to share data on trust. So no to easier access. And yes to access, provided that we can fulfill a number of conditions. Because we know, and I think most of the presentations today have shown, that access to data, the ability to share data, is important for all innovative new solutions. We could stop all drug development today, and then just by increasing compliance based on data and targeting our drugs more efficiently to different patients today, we would still see an improvement in health. And data is behind that. So yes, we should get better access to data because we can. It's possible. We are there today. But we have to focus on privacy, on security, and on trust and fairness. Fairness in the way that we distribute the potential value that you can create based on this data. So, why is data valuable? Or what makes particularly Danish data valuable? Or, since I'm now standing in Sweden, Swedish, or I should actually say Nordic data valuable. You've already seen one of the videos talking about the CPR number in Denmark. We all have a unique identifier in all the Scandinavian countries. We have high penetration of electronic medical records. So there is a lot of data already out there. We've been collecting these data for years. And now we are in the process also of structuring this data so that it's not, if we want to create a data lake, if you haven't structured and cleaned up your data, you get a mud lake. You want a clear data lake that you can actually analyze that gives you visibility. And then finally, if you believe in trust and if you see GDPR as an opportunity, then you have something really going for you. And that's how we see it. GDPR is an opportunity to use the citizens, to give them control in sharing a lot of the data that might be relevant for health. So, in Scandinavia, in the Nordic countries, we have a large accessible pool of real-world data with relevance for health, with significant potential for creating value for citizens, patients, and there's a clear distinction between citizens and patients, clinicians, researchers, healthcare providers, and society at large. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to build a system, or we are building a system that combines data from the healthcare system, from the clinical registries, basically me as a patient, with data with me as a citizen and me as an individual. And those two categories that you see below the waterline, this is supposed to look like an iceberg. Obviously, this guy is from Denmark. He doesn't know much about icebergs. But these two latter categories are the data you can access via GDPR. The first ones you can access via public data responsible and gatekeepers, I would say. And how do we build that system? Well, essentially by using a new technology that has been developed in the last 20 years. So what we offer, what we propose to do at Data Fair together with our partners is a solution where data at all stages are encrypted using multi-party computation. And that is basically the highest, most secure way of handling data. It is security and privacy by design. It means that nobody will be able to trace any data point back to an individual. And it also means that while data is in process and being analyzed, while data from different sources is being combined, it will be data but not data, because data will be distributed on a number of servers. So we have a solution. We have raised 100 million Danish kroner in the last 12 months from soft funding to implement this solution, and we think it'll be up and running in the next 2 to 3 years in Denmark in a public-private partnership. So we're not here to raise money. I'm not really here to pitch my company. I'm here to pitch the value of Nordic healthcare data. To improve health, it's a must. Nordic countries are well placed, but we need to move now because others who are less well placed have moved faster. Clear principle must be followed. There's a promising solution in test right now. The potential for value creation is significant, and we could be there in the next 2 to 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Troel, for your presentation. I'd like to invite Per back as well. Per, do you have a couple of questions for Troel?
Yeah, no, again, very, very inspiring. Thank you so much for this. And really showing a direction of where we might be heading. And of course, I want to know more about this. I want to know more about, if you say the multi-part computation part, how far away are we in terms of this? And also, what is it really that we in this first, when you do this in this first, if you say case or so, what is it really that is involved in that? What are you going to look at?
So in terms of multi-party computation, we are there. It's a general platform that was tested 2 years ago with the Danish Statistics Bureau or Statistics Denmark. And now we are using, together with our partner, we are applying a particular application designed for healthcare data. So it's there, and we'll be deploying it on with Statistics Denmark within the next 12 months. So we know it works. We know it fulfills the requirements for safety and privacy. And now what we need to show is that we can actually create value, clinical value, and value for patients by using it to combine different data, healthcare data, basically.
Yeah. And is that the first step that you will really test it in from? Is it from a research perspective at first to see how you can find new types of solutions like medical treatments or so on, or is it in clinical practice, or how is it going to be?
It's both. I mean, our vision is to basically build a one-stop shop so that you could come to Denmark and say, okay, I would like to have answers to questions based on existing data, answers that I cannot get from randomized clinical trials because they're too expensive, because patients are not available. So that is the vision, and we'll be there in a couple of years. We'll be coming out with news about it in a week, but we can't say anything about it yet. So what can you use this data for? You can use it for better treatment. Basically, it'll be a way to use real-world evidence to bridge the gap between RCT data from randomized clinical trials, which is the golden standard today, but also has some problems because it's in a controlled setting. It doesn't reflect the way the drug is being used by patients in the real world. It doesn't reflect comorbidity, different medications they're getting on top of their treatment. You can also use it from a pharmaceutical company perspective. If you can access the data that we want to access, and you can preserve privacy, then you will have data you can use to give conditional approval for a drug. That means that you can have a drug approved and you can get the reimbursement, provided that you can document that this drug is only going to be used to those patients that you have shown in your trials should receive the drug. Because that's another challenge. Roche will come with a nice, really efficacious, very expensive new cancer treatment. And then the answer is, well, if we approve it, you're telling us that there's 200 patients that will qualify for that in Sweden. But the organization responsible for the reimbursement of it will say, well, what if it ends up being 2,000 5 years from now? We cannot control the prescription pattern of doctors. How can we give an approval that is conditional, and how can we then get the data to make sure that both parties agree on how the situation is evolving? So everything from clinical trials to development of new treatments to price negotiations and health economic analysis.
Really interesting discussions, and we were going to continue, but I'm going to invite Eva to join us back on stage as well to talk about the larger issues when we talk about integrating health-related data. And three of you represent different perspectives. You are representing the Swedish, perspective with the company, with Capiche. You are the Danish side with this private-public partnership experience, and of course, Roche, this global pharma player. We talked a lot about the challenges, and there are opportunities to integrate in a much better way. But if you could pick up one main challenge from your standpoint to kind of further the conversation here, what has been the single most biggest challenge that you're facing in the integration of health-related data? Starting with Per.
Yeah, no, I think, and I mentioned that a little bit before also in terms of, I think that a main challenge that I see is really the implementation part. Yeah. We start really to see some great examples and that we start to see like the technique is getting there, and we have very much of the, if you say, the solutions in terms of the technical capabilities and knowledge. But moving from that into having it in place and if you say integrated with our ecosystems and so on. And that to me is a real problem. And I believe that maybe a solution for that moving forward, and I think your solution is very, very interesting from that perspective, that it's about the co-creation part, the partnering. We've seen that it's very difficult for someone to come with a final solution and present that to someone and believe that that decision taker will just open their arms for it. Everyone wants a little bit to be part of the solution.
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. I think scalability is an issue. Yeah. There's a lot of projects, and in the best of worlds, the projects succeed, but after the project is wrapped up, nothing happens. Yeah. And we've certainly tried to be very conscious about it. And the starting point for the projects that we're running is basically, what do the clients want? In this case, where is the money? Who is normally very comfortable about handling this data and have very strict rules for that. So we're saying, how can we service private and public researchers and who have problems? And that's the other place you should start. Don't start with a solution that addresses a need, because you're getting nowhere. First of all, you need to find a problem that's big enough, and then you need to make sure that the head of finance or the CEO thinks it's a problem. And if you start there, I think then the chances of success are bigger. It's not enough, as you say. I think that you have to, in a Scandinavian context, Nordic context, you have to be very conscious about how you work in a public-private partnership. Because otherwise, this data, which is, as one of the videos shows, very good, it's been there for many years, and it'll remain there for many years, right? Yep. So trust is not only for the individual citizen, it's also for the organizations who are there to be the custodians of this data.
Eva, what are your reflections?
Yeah, no, I agree on what you say. We have also found that data being locked up is a huge problem. Access to the data itself. It's in the healthcare system today in Sweden, there are so many different systems, and just getting the data out of these systems and addressing that has been a major issue. Yeah.
And we were talking a lot about, there are a lot of strengths in how the Nordics handle data with personal numbers and patient registries and so on. But obviously that potential is very much untapped. And I think in our discussion, we're talking about the collaborative approach that the Nordic has towards health-related data. Where do you think we are right now, and where do you think we will be in, say, 5 years when it comes to being better at collaborating or taking this forward? Will we be one of those shining beacons worldwide to say, hey, come and look at the Nordics. We have been successful in implementing health data integration. Do you think we can reach there? What are your thoughts? Three of you. Who would like to start answering this big question? Charles.
I think we could. I think we can. But if you want to be there in 5 years' time, we have to move pretty fast. The train is leaving the station.
Yep.
I think we have, as I said, there are some things that make Scandinavian data very good. Because as soon as you start talking about more than just health data, all the other data that are relevant for health, I remember one of the questions you asked there, how many people have actually used an app today that is relevant for their health? And I would say we all have, because you probably checked the weather and decided whether you would walk or bike or take your car to work. And you probably also bought food with your app. These are also health decisions. And these are relevant. And if you want to access all those data in an easy way, that's where the Nordic countries have a clear advantage, because all data is linked to one unique identifier. But we need to start moving, and I sense that that the organizations that are responsible for they are realizing there is value in this, and we need to move. And now that the technology is there and solutions making data available, safe and privacy preserving.
Per and Eva, do you agree with Troels' assessment?
Yeah, I certainly agree. And also, I mean, a lot of the regions in Sweden are moving to new patient records, where they are opening up for also collaborating with different types of systems. So I think there is definitely a possibility, but we need to move.
Per, what are your thoughts?
No, and I agree as well that we do have an advantage in terms of that we have come very far in terms of being digital in everything that we do in the Nordic countries, and so that is of course combined with having our unique identifiers and so on. We have the foundation to make this work. I think it's also what is still a barrier. I think is that it needs to be taken some sometimes difficult decisions. That we can see, for example, in terms of just GDPR, how we look at that from in different ways depending on what country you're in, just in Europe, and seeing that as an enabler or a barrier for moving in a positive direction here. So I think that it's not only about having the foundation, we need to make some tough decisions also.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I also think, and I would compliment Roche as one company for that, is to take this ecosystem approach. That you see the leading pharmaceutical companies are not just in a country with a national subsidiary to sell their drugs. They actually realize that they need to build an ecosystem where they learn to work and collaborate in different ways in order to move this forward. And I think Roche is a good example of a company that's taking that approach.
So I sense that everyone agrees that this is a burning platform. There's a sense of urgency. We need to move now in order for us to stand out globally. So what exactly needs to happen? We're talking about collaboration ecosystem. Do you have a perspective on who should take the lead? Should it be healthcare? Should it be pharma? Should it be policymakers? What needs to happen for us to actually get there?
I think you need all the different parties. I think somebody needs to bring the different parties together and see that there is a hidden win-win situation for all. Right? Pharmaceutical companies can get an insight and actually be able to offer precision medicine. They can only do that if they get access to real-world data. So there's an advantage for them. They could also be doing innovative trials based on existing data that will reduce the cost. Some pharmaceutical companies today have a policy where it's secondary data first. You're not allowed to do a clinical trial unless you've first explored what is actually available there of data. And then you need to understand and play with the public system, because that's what we also all have in common. Scandinavian countries, the data, healthcare provision is public systems. So what we are thinking about doing in Denmark is saying the money that we can earn through a system like this should be going back to those with the data. That'll give them an incentive. If you could make a research fund for investigator-sponsored research, not just pharmaceutical, but the other research, and actually the data that the hospitals make available, if that could create value that could then go back into trials, then you create some incentives. So you don't have to push people.
Right. Eva, Per, what are your thoughts?
No, certainly. I mean, there's a lot of parties that needs to be involved in this work, and the people with a problem and the people probably benefiting from this needs to drive it together. But we are all patients. We also could see the benefit of this. So I think we all need to push for this to move.
And I believe that if we just move back a few years and had these discussions, it was very much talking about the politicians' role in this. I think we've learned now that I think that cannot be seen as the only decision maker in terms of making this happen. I think we're much more likely to be successful if we move in the direction that you're describing, where I, for example, look at, can we, for example, find kind of a consortium type of solution where you have startups together with established, if you say, global companies together with regions, together with authorities and so on, that together find the solutions and build on that. And I think also it does not need to be perfect from the beginning. If we can just start and show it, if you say small scale but still scalable, then that would be enough to get things going.
Exactly.
And if that happens in Denmark, in Sweden, if it's just at one local area or so on, doesn't really matter. But if we just look at how can we then scale this up and make that start rolling, then I think we will see something happen.
Fantastic. One final comment to you, Per. I think there are a lot of interest to find a solution in integrating health-related data. We've heard examples from DataFair and for Capiche. What is your general advice from Roche to startups wishing to do something in that space? What would you say to them for them to succeed?
First, I think that we found that it's not about having the perfect solution and believe that that will solve everything, but rather about having the vision of where do you want to go, and also answering to a clear need that you can really show that this is something that you can find a solution to, and you don't need to have it all figured out, but knowing where do you want to go, what type of solution is it that you want or problem is it that you want to solve, and then be open to interact with other parties to really see that this is something you do in partnership, because these type of challenges is nothing that one party can do by themselves. It's all about partnership. So I think that those are some key areas, and also I think, as we discussed here today, also have started to think about not only the solution itself, but how is this really going to be, if you say again, integrated with the ecosystem. To start to think about that, and because that is what will make one solution stand out among the crowd.
Perfect. So I hear 4 main points. One is have a vision. Number 2, meet a clear need, articulate what that need is. Number 3, engage and accept and embrace partnerships. No man can solve this alone. And the 4th thing, always keep implementation in mind. Make it extremely concrete.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Per, Troels, and Eva, for a great discussion. We will now go to a short break before we wrap up this event with a panel discussion where we'll bring back all our challenge owners, Roche, Capio, BII, and Smile, to just reflect on the day and to talk about where the future lies for health tech. So we're going to leave you with one final video for today, again about HealthTech in Medicon Valley, produced by Greater Copenhagen. And I'll see you back here at 12 o'clock.